Good stuff. It's Dave Johar and John Trithui, pleased to be joined this time by former WBO super lightweight champion of the world, Chris Algieri, here to talk about Marvellous Marvin Hagler, who sadly passed away on Saturday night. We're here to celebrate his life and go through his fights and just talk about the man. Loads of history there as well, including the Fab Four and what he meant for boxing. So thank you guys for joining us here today. Thank you, Chris, for taking time out of your busy schedule. And as always, thank you, John. So let's begin then. I mean, John, what are your thoughts on Marvin Hagler and how did you take the news?
Yeah, it was sad news. It's always sad when anyone passes away. It was a bit sudden because I don't think it was a sudden death and he wasn't ill or no one was aware. And he's gone at a young age. I think he was 65. In terms of as a fighter, fantastic fighter. I think he was awarded or nominated Fighter of the Decade or something, maybe in the 80s, Fighter of the Decade. So that tells you what a lot of people thought of him. And we were in that era that was fantastic with the Fab Four. So I'm really interested to find out what Chris has got to say, because I think he's got some stories of maybe where he's met him and what his expert opinion would be on who he thought the best of the Fab Four were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, John, it's tremendous tragedy that he passed, and so young. And honestly, he's a very fit guy too. You know, even his later years really kept it together. But just to talk about him, you know, as a fighter, the fighter of the decade of the 80s, you know, all those tremendous fights that he had, Mugabe, John the Beast Mugabe, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard, of course, the very controversial fight, Thomas Hearns, Roberto Duran, which I went back and watched this week. What a fight. That was Duran's first time fighting at middleweight, and to go 15 rounds with Marvin Hagler. And it was a very close decision. He was actually, Roberto Duran was actually winning going into the last couple of rounds, and Hagler had to dig deep in order to get the win there. You know, it's just a testament to both of them. You know, Roberto Duran, the best lightweight who's ever lived, you know, going all the way up to middleweight and fighting one of the best middleweights who's ever lived and putting on a tremendous performance. And I mean, how do you not talk about the war? Tommy Hearns, Marvellous Marvin Hagler. You know, the round one is considered by most the best round in boxing history. You know, it's so much violence packed into 3 minutes of action. It's absolutely tremendous. You know, and even it's, you know, I think the fight's 8 minutes long or something like that. There was still a tremendous sway of who's winning and who's in ebbs and flows, and both men getting the better of the other at times, and ending in a hellacious single punch knockout. I mean, absolutely incredible stuff. You know, Marvin Hagler is just one of those guys. He transcended the sport. Everyone knows Marvellous, the Marvellous One. Legally changed his name to Marvellous Marvin Hagler because they said that the announcers would not use the name Marvellous. So he got his name legally changed to Marvellous Marvin Hagler. And in lieu of this interview, I actually I did some research about Hagler and just reading about his amateur pedigree, going through his record. Absolutely tremendous record. You know, he had 2 losses and 2 draws, but, you know, I'm sorry, 3 losses and 2 draws. You know, one of them obviously being the highly controversial last fight that he ever had with Sugar Ray Leonard, which is a tremendous fight as well. And pretty much everyone who you talk to, there's going to be split about who they think will deserve a decision. Although I think most people I talk to usually think Marvin won the fight. But the fights with Vito Antuofermo, the first one being a draw where most people thought that he won, fighting in other people's hometowns and getting bad decisions, but he was a absolute killer in rematches, usually stopping whoever he fought, you know, a tough fight with or had a draw with or lost to, rematching them and knocking them out within a few rounds. He did that to Antuofermo, a couple other guys in there as well. I think Willie Monroe, he knocked out as well when he fought the rematch. You know, the guy he's just such a tremendous athlete and competitor that if you got away with making it to the end of the fight, or if you got away with sneaking away with the decision or getting lucky to get a draw, you know, you're getting your comeuppance on the next fight back, because he's coming back and he's bringing the heat. Absolutely violent puncher with both hands, tremendously slick early on, which I think a lot of people forget. You know, he was a very good boxer puncher, a true testament to that word. You know, that term that we hear still thrown around so much. You know, hit and don't be hit. Later in his career, turned much more of a stalker and power puncher, and the way that he fought Leonard, and in the way he fought John Mugabe, who at the time, I think he was 26-0, 26 knockouts, absolutely tremendous puncher, huge talent, someone that everyone looked at was like, oh, this guy's going to be a king. And Hagler broke him down, fighting southpaw, fighting orthodox, one of the first fighters to seamlessly switch sides and be able to fight well out of both. Just is insane. That fight is, I think that's the first fight I ever saw of Hagler, was the Beast Mugabe fight, which for you fight fans or Hagler fans, if you haven't watched that fight, go watch that fight. Any young fighter should, because the technical proficiency of Hagler in that fight, like I said, switching sides, fighting a murderous puncher. And that was him later in his career. That earned him the Sugar Ray Leonard fight. So, he's not as good as he was, when he was younger, and, to many people's eyes at that point, but still an absolutely tremendous performance against a very, very dangerous guy.
Great breakdown, mate. You can tell you know your stuff, which is nothing less than I expected anyway. While we're on those Fab Four, who would, in your opinion, was the best of the four, and why?
So it's tough because they really are all different weight classes. I think Roberto Duran's the best lightweight who's ever lived. I think Sugar Ray Leonard at welterweight is nearly unbeatable. And I think him and Tommy Hearns at welterweight are neck and neck, because, when you watch that first fight, Hearns was winning the majority of the time they were in the ring. It's just Leonard was able to hurt Hagler more and break him down as the fight went on, getting a late round stoppage. But I mean, Tommy Hearns is an absolute nightmare to think about as a welterweight. Fast hands, good power, great boxing skill, long, strong, huge for the weight class. I mean, again, one of the top welterweights we've ever seen. And then obviously Hagler, who's the king of the middleweights, and that's where everybody ended up going, was, fighting at Hagler at middleweight. So it's like, Hagler had to sit at the top, at the bigger weight classes. And there's always that saying, the bigger good man beats, the smaller good man. I don't know. I'm very torn with that. I was always a Leonard fan stylistically, because he was such a good athlete, so fast, always flashing the smile, killer instinct. Definitely, he was probably my favorite to watch, but dude, I mean, Roberto Duran at lightweight, his defense mixed with his offense and the violence that he brought to the ring, absolutely tremendous. Tommy Hearns, I thought he was such a spectacle. His punching power, his hand speed, to have power and still be fast and be that big and that long. He was a freak of nature, total freak of nature at welterweight. And then to go all the way up to light heavyweight, cruiserweight, I think he even fought at. Tremendous. And then Hagler, obviously, I just gushed about him for the past 10 minutes. It's hard to pick who was the best of the group, but I would think that I would say my favorite of the group was Leonard when I was growing up as a young fighter.
Again, you've explained that really well. I think that the bit that I liked the best was the weight classification. So if you ask me the question, I'd probably answer it as Roberto Duran, for the same reason you talked about the lightweight. If you look at I know the weight classifications are slightly different and there's slightly more in this era, but if he went from lightweight, if he went through the ranks now, they've gone lightweight, light welter, light middleweight, and middleweight, he would have been a 5-weight world champion. So in my mind, because he beat Leonard in the first fight. So in my mind, I almost feel like that's why my decision, but you're right, they're all great at different weights. What about yourself, Dave? Who was your favourite out of the four?
I've got to say Leonard as well. However, for Marvin Hagler's ferocity as well, the violence, just the sheer spectacle of the man, and just the first round of the Tommy Hearns fight as well. That's cited, as you alluded to, Chris, probably the best round of boxing, just dismantling someone who was so good. I'm torn between Hagler and Sugar Ray Leonard. It's a 50-50 split for me out of those two. I mean, looking at Hagler as a middleweight, how do you think he would have fared in the model middleweight era? So we're talking about Canelos and Triple G and even Billy Joe Saunders and Andrade. How do you think he would have fared on that, guys? Chris, what's your thoughts on that? I think that Hagler's one of those guys who actually could transcend time better than a lot of other fighters, because, like I said earlier about him being a true boxer puncher, he had very good boxing skills. He was very slick. He was hard to hit. He had good defense, which he's not really known for. But if you look at his earlier fights and his earlier work, you see that.
And at the end of the day, I think defense is really what separates people at the highest levels. The best fighters in the world have great defense. And Hagler had that, especially when he was in his absolute prime, which a lot of people say we really didn't get to see him with the best fighters that he fought in his prime. He fought them at a later age because Joe Frazier has a great quote. He's like, you got 3 strikes against you. You're black, you're southpaw, and you're good. So nobody wanted to fight him for a long time. So a lot of people would argue that we didn't really see the best Hagler in the ring with the best guys that he ever fought, like I alluded to with John the Beast Mugabe and then Sugar Ray Leonard in his last 2 fights, where people were actually saying he looked older in those fights. So, and those were his last 2 fights. So I do believe that he would fare very well in the modern era. Although I'm always a guy, I'm an old school head at heart, but I'm also I'm into sports science, and I understand that athletes of today are a different thing of athletes of the past, and training modalities are very different. And we're able to prepare human bodies in a different way now than they were. Nostalgia is great, but sports science is science.
I've actually done a lot of homework on you, as you would expect, but I've seen maybe another time we could get an interview with you about yourself, because the science behind it, certainly in the modern day. I interviewed somebody yesterday that was very old school and was like, I don't get the nutrition bit. They're still the same weight gloves. There's still 2 hands. It's not like a motor car's better or a tennis racket's better. So definitely the science in it nowadays. Well, look, I wouldn't mind that story if you could tell us. I think you have had the privilege of meeting Marvin Hagler.
Yeah. And honestly, it was the most starstruck I've ever been in my entire life. I've met a lot of really, really interesting people, some superstars. I met Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, but Marvin Hagler was the most starstruck I've ever been. So I was actually on vacation in Aruba with my girlfriend at the time and her family. And it was right after one of my wins. I fought Mighty Mike Arnautis from Greece. And it was one of my step-up fights leading up to some of my bigger fights before I fought Emmanuel Taylor, and then went on to win the title against Provatnikov. It was the year prior. So I used to have a big fight and then go on vacation, kind of, put my feet up, kind of forget about the boxing world and, stay off Twitter and whatnot and just put my feet up in the sand. So I'm in Aruba, but at the same time, I'm always a fitness guy. So I would run every morning. And I went for a run one morning and I'm coming back into the hotel. I open a door and I've got my hat low and I'm dripping sweat because it's really hot. And I see a boxing shirt as I'm passing me along the way. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm not thinking of it. And then I look back and I see this very strongly built man with a bald head and, rather large head. And I'm looking at him in the back. He's walking away. And I'm thinking the boxing shirt. I'm like, man, that guy look like Marvin Hagler is as offshoot as possible. Just throwing that into the air. And that guy kind of looked like Marvin Hagler. Barely even saw him. I'm walking back to my room and I go, I'm thinking. I couldn't get it out of my head. I'm like, that was Marvin Hagler. That was Marvin Hagler. That's I'm saying it out loud. I went home. I'm like, Marvin Hagler is here. He's staying here. He's on vacation. I'm going to see him at some point. A couple of days go by. I don't see him. I'm still doing my regular routine of going for runs, hanging out by the pool and whatnot. And then I'm with my girlfriend and her sister, and we're walking away from the bar towards the beach. And sure enough, I see that same head and broad shoulders walking ahead of me. And I go, there he is. That's the guy, the fighter I was talking about. And then I start rattling off all the information I just told you guys within earshot behind him, telling them this is one of the greatest middleweights who's ever lived. He had this many defenses. He fought this, then he catches wind of it. And I go, excuse me, champ. I go, are you Marvellous Marvin Hagler? I'm sorry. I said, excuse me, sir. Are you Marvellous Marvin Hagler?
Brilliant.
Without breaking stride, he's got 2 pina coladas in his hand. He doesn't even look at me. He goes, yup, and just keeps walking.
How long ago was this, Chris? Was this years or
2013?
So did he know who you were by any chance?
Nope. I was not really on the world stage yet. My biggest fight to date was Mike Arnautis, who was at the time.
Maybe a couple of years down the line, it would have been different.
Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, okay. And then again, I'm still talking. And I'm like, we kind of get to the corner where he's about to walk to the beach, and his wife was actually there on their towel by where they're set up. And I go, I'm sorry, champ, sorry to bother you again. I'm like, would you mind if we got a photo? And he looks at me, then he looks at the 2 drinks, and then he goes back and he goes, I got these 2 drinks, like as if they said like that was the end of the conversation. I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, champ, I understand. He goes, listen, he's like, I'll put them down. No, I'm sorry, he didn't say that. So he goes, I'm like, oh man. So I just sit there, I'm just kind of watching him talking to my lady, whatever. And then I see him and he goes and he waves me over, like out of the blue. I didn't thought it was the end of it. I got these 2 drinks. I was like, all right, whatever. And he, I'll let him have his vacation. So he actually went to his wife, gave her the drinks, then waved me over. And then I came over, met his wife, met him. We took a photo. And I said, I didn't say who I was. I didn't say I was a fighter. Just said, enjoy your vacation. Pleasure to meet you guys. Enjoy. And then I went off to, where our blanket was or towel, whatever. He proceeded to swim laps in the ocean for a good hour. Just took off his shirt, went in and just swam in a circle around. He'd swim out, cut across, come back to the shore, jog across, and just doing a circle for a good 45 minutes to an hour. And at this, this was 7-8 years ago. So, he's in his late 50s at the time. Was in tremendous shape. I have a photo. I can send it to you guys too. So that's another reason I'm kind of like surprised, him succumbing so young, because he looked super fit when I met him.
Yeah, such a shame. Really
such a loss, wasn't it? Were you at the fight, Chris, on Saturday night, the Chocolatito and Estrada 2 one?
I actually was not. I was scheduled to be, and then we had a couple of the undercard fighters. The fights were scratched due to COVID from the opponents. Yeah. And so they canceled that pre-show that I normally do before the bell. So I ended up staying here in Miami.
Yeah, because I think myself and John, we found out as the fight was happening, right? Mm-hmm. When Michael Buffer announced the 10 bells for Marvin Hagler. Where were you when you found out?
I was in my condo in South Florida, and I forgot. I don't know if someone texted me. No, I saw some Instagram posts first. And I wasn't sure if it was real, because you don't want to get your news from Instagram. So then I Googled, searched it, and read some news reports, and got the confirmation. I had posted about it pretty early on. Just saw it scrolling, and then went to the news and checked that out. I watched one of his fights like straight away. I was like, oh, let's put on. I watched the Beast Mugabe fight.
Isn't it funny? Well, not funny, but when you lose someone, that's the first thing you did. I did the same thing. And then this morning in prep for this, I watched the first round of the Hearns fight, and I thought, well, hang on, I'll watch the rest of it. Then I started looking at showreel stuff about Hagler. Sometimes you appreciate, not that you didn't in the first place, even more when you do lose someone. But really, really sad that he's gone.
Yeah, it's just like you. I think you want to remember people for the best moments and the things that maybe selfishly struck you, and that's how I thought. That's why I thought about the Beast Mugabe fight. I said it was the first fight that I had ever seen Marvin Hagler, and was so impressed with his ability. And so when I heard it, that was the first fight I thought of watching. You, like you said, you would think you would watch the Hearns fight, but for me personally, that was the first fight I saw him fight. So that's where I went, when I heard the news.
Great stuff. I think he did a little bit of acting at the end of his career as well, which I'm not sure they were Hollywood films. I think he moved to Italy for a bit and starred in a few films, but were you aware of that?
I own one of them. I bought one.
I've not seen them. I read about it and I was like, I'm sure I need to have a look at it, but he tried to dabble in that. Well, it's been brilliant having you on, Chris. Really, really appreciate your time. We know how busy you are, and we'd love to get in contact with you again and get you back on down the line maybe and talk about your career, because I'm desperate to know if you would make a comeback. Last time out, you were on the big AJ card, and us Brits over here, that was a massive fight, and you beat Tommy Coyle, which was great. No chance for comeback?
Oh yeah, there's a chance. There's always a chance.
Cool.
Oh yeah. I still got some big ones in me.
Good stuff. Well, we'll contact you soon and maybe get you back on and talk about your career. Is that all right?
Sounds good. Anytime.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
Enjoy the video. Feel free to hit the like, subscribe, and share. As always, if you want to support us to the next level, head over to the patreon.com/ThaBoxingVoice. We have tons of exclusive from Border Wars, entitled betting shows. The list goes on and on and on. But in addition to that, if you guys have questions for fighters, trainers, and promoters, this is where you can submit them. We will run out, get these questions answered, and put it back on the show just for you guys. Appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit the like, subscribe, and share. As always, if you want to support us to the next level, head over to the patreon.com/ThaBoxingVoice. We have tons of exclusive from Border Wars, entitled betting shows. The list goes on and on and on. But in addition to that, if you guys have questions for fighters, trainers, and promoters, this is where you can submit them. We will run out, get these questions answered and put it back on the show just for you guys. Appreciate it. Peace.